Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. It's great, isn't it great? We're having a great time here. So yeah, we're gonna have a nighttime stream. We did a morning afternoon stream, and I think this is how these things work. But we'll start the music and we'll get going here.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, this is interesting. Now that we have this whole room just for streaming, we got some new equipment here and all of that. We're going to, oh, that's a good super chat question. James Burnham and the managerial revolution. Very good. And now that we got some new equipment, we're going to do more streams than we did before, right? In the past, we did usually about only one stream a day. But this morning, I did a stream, and that was really good for my European friends. The folks in Britain, United Kingdom, the folks in Belgium, Luxembourg, the folks in Italy, the folks in Poland, the folks in Russia. It was great to do a morning stream, right? Thank you, Viking Dave. Thank you very much. So we did a morning stream, and now it's just after 10 o'clock here in New York City, in Brooklyn, my lovely Brooklyn apartment. Not the same Brooklyn apartment, but it's a different one, but it's still lovely. And, we're back, and, so we're going to try to do this. And this is good, right, for my friends in California. This is good for my friends in Hawaii. This is good for my friends in Australia. So we'll do it that way, right? And this is good. This is really, really good shit, right? We're having different streams, and it's great. It's just really, really great. And we're going to do it that way. So the way we generally do things is that I give my opening remarks. I talk about stuff. While you give the opening remarks, super chats come in, and I write them down. Someone just asked a great one about James Burnham. Wrote it down. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, write it down. We do the roll call, and that's like our halfway mark, the roll call. And then after the roll call, we then do the questions for the rest of the night. We do the Q&A discussion. So if there's something you want me to talk about in the Q&A portion, by all means, just shoot me a super chat. And I will talk about it in the second half of the show. That's how this works. It's great to be back, and we're going to be doing a lot more of these streams. The elections in the United States, the midterm elections, are tomorrow. So that's happening. That's exciting. Good stuff. As a journalist, I never reveal who I'm voting for, midterms are happening. But I guess I just want to say this to begin with. I just want to throw this out there. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but it's kind of important right now. I don't care about the bullshit. I do not care about the bullshit. All of this nittery, so-and-so said so-and-so. Oh my God, did you hear what so-and-so just said? I don't give a fuck. And I'm so tired of it. I am so tired of it. I am sick of it. Nobody is learning anything about the problems of capitalism and imperialism, the need for workers' power and socialism. Nobody is learning anything. When we have a little slap fight over who said what about, I heard that you said something about so-and-so. Well, so-and-so told me that you said that, oh my God, did you? I'm so tired of this. I am so tired of this. Do you really think nobody is getting smarter from any of this, right? From, this online personality is fighting with this online personality who's mad at this nobody's getting any fucking smarter. No one's learning anything. And we're on the brink of a new world war. The danger of a new world war is hanging over our heads. And so much of the content, I mean, look, I had to make my comeback video. I had to clear my name. I didn't want to make that video. You think I wanted to make a video and talk about gross stuff that shouldn't be on the internet? But I had to, right? Well, it's out there. Why does that video have way more views than most of my videos do? I mean, that video, I had to make it to clear my name and expose that I was being lied about, and I did a good job of it, and the case should be closed as of now. But it's like, we need to be educating people. We need to be engaging with people. We need to be winning people to anti-imperialist positions. And so much of the content that I see from people that are supposed to be anti-imperialists, people that are supposed to be socialists, people that are supposed to be Marxists and revolutionaries. Good question. So much of the content that I see is just internet content creators. No gossip and intrigue allowed. No, it's allowed. It's allowed. I mean, you have to talk about it to some degree or other, but so much of it is just shit talking among content creators. That's all it is. It's content creators talking shit about each other's personal lives, about the way people look, about who's a dude bro and who's gay and who's slimy and who's this and who's that. And it's stupid. It's fucking stupid. It is so stupid. And no one is getting any smarter. We're on the brink of a world war. We're in the middle of an economic crisis. There is a breakdown of capitalism going on a global level. It's playing out in a society-wide crisis in the Western countries, rising instability, divisions in the ruling class. And we're sitting here talking about, oh my God, did you hear what so-and-so said to me? Oh my God, did you see? Oh my God, no, he said what? Or who he, what? Shut up. And I have to engage with this because I've become a target of it, right? I put myself out there. You all know my name. You all know I'm on here giving myself, right? I give myself on this. So I have become a target of this more than anybody, really. And because of that, I have to deal with, and I have to engage it. And when people come at me, I have to come back at it, but I'm tired of it. I'm really, really tired of it. And I'm really, really tired of it. And the other thing is that, when there are divisions in our community, it's not a good thing. It is not a good thing when there are divisions in our community. When people who are anti-imperialist, people that are against this system, people that are opposing the wars are fighting with each other, it's not a good thing. But for a lot of people, they see it as a way to make a buck. I'm serious. They see it as a way to make a buck. Right? Oh, there's a big fight going on, and some people support this person and some people support that person. And wow, this is great. And if I stream about it, I can get a lot of views it's just sad. It's just sad, right? It's like, oh boy, there's two content creators fighting with each other. Why don't I make a stream about it? And it's just, why? Like, educate your audience, teach people something. I want to just get this out there because there's so much that does need to be said. So much that actually needs to be said. But instead, there is just an endless amount of high school drama. That's what it is. It's high school drama. And it's stupid and it's lacking in political content. And, I said better, fewer, but better. I know that all that shit gets me a lot of views and I have to engage it sometimes, but I'm going to make an effort, a concerted effort not to engage it. That is going to be one of my goals, to engage it less and less. And if that means I get less views, fine. It genuinely annoys me that more people are interested in watching me have a slap fight with Jason and Ruhe. More people are interested in me responding to allegations and personal revelations about sex than they are about the important issues that are facing all of our society. The fate of the human race is in question, folks. The fate of the human race is in question, and we're sitting here arguing about sex. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. Kim.com has been talking a lot lately about the collapse of the U.S. space foundation as a proxy war against Russia. How? Okay. Okay. All right. We can talk about that. What's going on in Haiti right now? That is a good question. And I can give you answers. Very good. So I'm going to tell you what you need to know, which is why we are in the crisis that we are in. There are 4 fundamental attributes and problems of capitalism that have led us to the crisis that we are in. The reason there is increasing division in our politics, number 1. The reason that there is increasing division in our politics, the reason that our economy is falling apart, the reason that living standards and life expectancy in the United States is declining, the reason that neighborhoods that were once prosperous are now dotted with empty, foreclosed homes, the reason that we're transitioning to a low-wage police state is rooted in the breakdown of capitalism. Let me just talk about this first of all. Right? When I was a kid, when they would teach us about communism in school, this is how they explained it. They said communists want everyone to be paid the exact same wage, no matter how hard they work. And capitalism is that those who work the hardest get the most. Our teacher said, oh, if I give every kid in this class a C, that would be communism. But because we have grades on a scale, that's capitalism. That's all bullshit. Right? It has nothing to do with what Marxism is about. It has nothing to do with what socialism is about. Socialism isn't about making everyone paid the same. Socialism isn't about, capitalism is not, rewarding people for hard work. They had incentive pay in the Soviet Union. I mean, this is all just a bunch of bullshit that we've been fed. What annoys me is that, I learned what actual Marxism is. And I've spent my entire life explaining to people that no, communism is not everyone gets paid the same wage. No, communism is not taxes. No, capitalism doesn't mean having money and having stuff, and getting rid of capitalism means everyone's poor. No, I've spent my whole life explaining to people what Marxism actually is. And then I see a bunch of these woke kids on the internet that are so amazingly stupid. They never learned what Marxism actually is, and they're going around going, yeah, everyone should get paid the same wage. And I come around and tell them what Marxism actually is, and they go, oh, you're a Nazbol. You're a Nazbol. You're a white supremacist. Actually, I want everyone to get paid the exact same wage. Hard work is Nazi. It's like, I've spent my whole life trying to explain to people what Marxism actually is. Right? Spent my whole life trying to teach people what Marxism actually means. And I see a bunch of woke kids that they accept the right-wing U.S. government caricature of Marxism. They think it's good. And that is obnoxious to me. It's very, very obnoxious to me. But anyway, Marxism points to 4 fundamental problems with capitalism. The first problem with capitalism is that under capitalism, production is carried out for profit rather than social good or social value. This is very important. This is the definition of capitalism. Capitalism is production organized for profit. When the means of production, the banks, the factories, the oil wells, the big box stores, the commanding heights of the economy, the airlines, the food processing centers, when the means of production are organized and operated for profit, that's capitalism. When the means of production function according to profit, that is capitalism. Production organized for profit is capitalism. And the first problem with capitalism is just that. We produce in order to make profit for owners rather than what is good for society. Sellability, not usability. Great example. Years ago, I went to the movies. Bought my ticket, went into the movie theater, and I went to the concession stand at the movie theater, and I got a drink. And I said, I'll have a drink. And they said, what size would you like? I said, I'll have medium drink. And they said, what do you want? I said, unnamed diet beverage. Of course, I didn't say that, but they filled up my drink with unnamed diet beverage, a little bit of ice. They brought my drink to the counter. And then they said to me, that'll be $5.50. And I said, $5.50 just for a soda? And they said, yep. Movie theaters, they have you as kind of a captive market there. So, I've noticed that the prices on movie theater snacks are often quite inflated. And I went into my wallet and I only had a $5 bill. I said, I've only got $5. And they said, well, it's $5.50. I said, it looks like I can't get it. So what did they do? They took my drink, my unnamed diet beverage, and they poured it out and they threw it in the garbage. And they threw the cup, the plastic cup, the paper cup in the garbage, and they poured out the water. That makes 0 sense. What sense does that make? Right? If I had drunk the soda and they hadn't poured it out or hadn't thrown it in the garbage, they would have been at the same place. But the thing is, they didn't make that soda for me to drink it. They made that soda to make profit. And if they gave it to me, that would set a precedent wherein people would not pay for sodas. Production for profit, not social good. Another great example, restaurants. It's very common in New York City. At the end of the night, restaurants often have a lot of food left over. It's very common for restaurants, at the end of the night, they throw all the old food in the garbage. But before they throw the food in the garbage, they will take motor oil and pour motor oil all over the food. And why do they do that? Well, they do that because they don't want a homeless person to go and eat the food out of the garbage. Now, what sense does that make? They lost the food anyway, but you see, if a homeless person were to eat the food out of the garbage, then they might not buy food from the store. This is capitalism. And in fact, Whole Foods, the store, there was a big scandal like a decade ago. Whole Foods actually fired an employee for eating a sandwich from Whole Foods that they had said to throw away. A rule, apparently, at Whole Foods that you cannot eat the food that they throw away. Why? They want their employees to pay for it. They get an employee discount, but they don't want them at the end of the night when they throw away the food. They do not want the employees to eat it, because if the employees eat it, well, then they ain't paying for it. Now, are they? That is capitalism. They didn't make that sandwich so people could eat it. They made that sandwich so they could make money from it. Right? In the wintertime, Union Square, there were some students. They discovered one of these stores, they put a whole bunch of winter coats into the garbage near Union Square in New York City. But before they threw these coats away, they sliced them up. Why? Because they didn't want someone to take them out of the garbage and put them on, because then they wouldn't buy a coat. Production organized for profit. That's the first problem of capitalism. And a lot of the bad things that we associate with capitalism, some of the most basic problems with capitalism, are rooted in this problem. For example, the military-industrial complex. War is profitable. Now, social good? No. People die. People are miserable. People lose their homes. People get their arms and legs shot off. War is awful, but it's profitable. Those weapons companies are not making weapons because weapons are unfortunately necessary, a necessary evil to keep people safe. No, they're making those weapons to make profits. The opioid epidemic. Again, drug manufacturers are not making drugs and medicines simply because people need medicine. No, they're making them to make profits. So we had a drug company, a number of drug manufacturers, opioid manufacturers, pressing doctors to overprescribe dangerous painkillers. Why? Because they're trying to make profits. Right? There's many examples of this. You can talk about pollution. They're trying to maximize their profits, right? If being less than kind to the environment, if creating a situation where the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio catches on fire because it's so polluted, if that's what you got to do to make profits, that's what you do. Capitalism is production organized for profit. And if something doesn't factor into the bottom line, it's called an externality. It means, hey, it doesn't count. When Lockheed Martin, they're making those bombs and tanks and weapons, they're, calculating how much it costs to make the tank, how much it costs to make the weapon. They're calculating how much it costs to ship the weapon to the military. They're calculating how much the military is going to pay them. But those children that get blown up, they are not calculated into the financial dividend. Those children who get blown up, those soldiers who get sent to a foreign country to get their arms and legs blown off, again, they are not on the adding sheet. They are not included in the accounting figures. They are external. They are externalities. They do not count. And if you have a huge corporation and the CEO of the corporation starts saying, I want to do what's best for the environment. I want to do what's best for the people of the country. I want to do what's best. They could be sued by their shareholders. They're legally obligated to maximize profits. It is their obligation. So a CEO, if they started doing the right thing and it wasn't profitable, and thank you, Dan, good to see you as well, they could actually be sued. Right? That is a problem with capitalism. Production organized for profit. That's the first problem with capitalism. Now, the second problem with capitalism big problem with capitalism, it comes from this, right? These problems build on each other. The second big problem with capitalism is what's called the general law of capitalist accumulation, which is that a corporation must be expanding constantly or else it begins to die. Expand or die, the general law of capitalist accumulation. The capitalist must make profits. And with those profits he makes, he must then reinvest the profits to expand the enterprise, to make bigger profits, to then invest those profits to expand the enterprise, to make bigger profits, to expand the enterprise bigger. the general law of capitalist accumulation, that a capitalist enterprise must constantly be expanding until you get a monopoly. When a monopoly comes along, then the economy comes to a grinding halt and you have monopolistic stagnation. A monopoly is achieved when you have one corporation that's cornered the market. And because every capitalist corporation is constantly needing to expand and needing to expand and needing to expand to get profits, to expand the enterprise, to get bigger profits, to expand the enterprise, because that is the situation in capitalism, we have invented all kinds of mechanisms to prevent monopolies from being established. For example, a movie theater. It is illegal for a movie theater to be owned by a movie studio. If you own a Hollywood movie studio, you cannot own a movie theater. Why is that? Well, because if you were a movie theater company and you were also the owner of a Hollywood studio, you would only show your movies. And then pretty soon you'd have a monopoly. And pretty soon there wouldn't be any competition among Hollywood filmmakers. So, as a rule, the government has to step in. If any owner of a Hollywood studio goes and buys a movie theater, they have to step in and say, no, you can't do that, because it would lead to a monopoly. And there's all kinds of examples like this. When I used to work at an insurance firm, right, I learned some of this. I didn't even know about some of these rules. But, for example, if you are an insurance broker and your job is to sell insurance policies, one thing you cannot do is you give some of your commission to the person you're selling it to, right? That is completely illegal, right? If you if your job is to sell insurance, right, and you get like commission as a salesperson, you sell insurance to one company, and you go to this company and you say to the guy who works there, who decides what insurance they buy, hey, if you buy from me, I'll give you a little bit of the profit that I make. I'll give you a little bit of my commission. That's illegal. Why is that illegal? Because he would only buy from you, right? And it would lead to a monopoly. There are all kinds of mechanisms, antitrust legislation, all kinds of mechanisms have been created to try and keep the capitalist economy grinding along, to keep the market competitive, to keep capitalism going. All kinds of mechanisms have been created. They say that, and this is one thing, I've seen libertarians say this, monopolies are only the result of the government. No. The capitalist market, because of the general law of capitalist accumulation, of enterprises having to get bigger, it eventually leads to monopolies. And the capitalists are constantly begging the government to break up corporations, to force back into a state of competition, because the natural logic of the market is centralization of wealth into the hands of a few. That's the way it naturally leads, right? It leads to corporations being eliminated and corporations continuing to expand until you have a monopoly, and then the economy falls apart, right? This is one of the built-in problems. Because it's production organized for profit, the capitalist enterprise must constantly be in a state of expansion. So that's problem number 2. And that, so much of the legislation that has been passed, so much of the the activities and the the regulating of the market has been done to deal with this inherent problem. Antitrust legislation has been set up, all kinds of laws, and endless amount of regulation of business and copyrights and like, for example, patents on products only last so many years, right? Because if only one company has a certain bit of technology, after a while they'll get a monopoly. So after so many years, the patent has to go away. There's a million mechanisms that they have invented to deal with this problem. That's problem number 2. Problem number 3. Overproduction. This is the problem of overproduction. The worker can never, and I have to get out I have to draw this out for you. The worker can never buy back what he produces. there will always be more products than there are workers who are able to buy them. The worker under capitalism will never buy back what he produces. And I'll explain to you why. It's quite simple. All right, let's say we're making pens, right? We have a pen factory. All right. So first, in order to make the pens, you're going to need the supplies, the parts of the pen. So that's A. A is your supplies. That's the parts of the pen. On top of that, you're going to need to ship the pens to the stores that sell them. So that's B. B, is the shipping. But then on top of that, you're going to need labor. And there's going to be labor costs. Right? You're going to have to hire someone to assemble those pens. So C is your labor costs. And so the total cost of the pen is D. But there's a problem there, isn't there? Right? You pay for your shipping, you pay for your supplies, you pay for your labor costs. The capitalist hasn't made a profit. Capitalist hasn't made a profit. Now, this is A and B, the shipping costs, the parts of the pen. That's fixed capital. You can't change that. So the capitalist profit is derived from C. C gets divided into C1 and C2. C1 is what the worker actually gets paid, and C2 is what the capitalist extracts as his profits, surplus value. The profits of the capitalist are extracted from the value put into the product created by the worker. So it's really A plus B, C1 plus C2 equals D, the final cost of the product. But regardless, you still have a fundamental problem, which is the worker. For every pen that's being produced, right, you get so much money being spent, so much percentage of it goes to pay for the parts, so much percentage of it goes to pay for the shipping, so much of it goes for the labor, some of the labor is cut into in order to make profits for the capitalist. It all equals D. C1 is what the worker is getting paid. C1 can never equal D. The amount that the worker is paid for every product that is produced can never be enough to buy it back. The worker can never buy back what he produces. The amount of wages that the capitalist pays into the economy is never enough to purchase all the products that he produces. So there's always going to be more products created than the worker can purchase. That is a problem with capitalism. And the boom-bust cycle of the capitalist market is this problem being manifested. It's that we get what are called gluts. This is a very basic economic term, gluts, G-L-U-T, gluts. When there's too much of a product, and as a result, the economy crashes. And they have done all kinds of stuff to deal with this. There is a cave, I believe, in Missouri, where the government buries cheese. Have you heard about this? The government is constantly buying cheese from farmers and burying it. Why? To keep the price of cheese high. And to keep, the government during the Great Depression, they killed a bunch of cattle to drive the price of cattle and beef to drive it higher. There is constantly an effort to deal with the problem of overproduction. Right? The housing bubble. Right? Oh. Housing bubble. That was a great example. That was a crisis of overproduction. In 2008, the housing bubble burst because there were all these houses being built. There's constantly houses being built in the United States, but the American people couldn't buy them, right? And so the housing bubble burst. All the people that were employed and involved in building houses ended up losing their jobs. You know, you had these banks, these mortgage banks that were lending people money, trying to keep them buying houses. But American working families couldn't afford to keep buying houses at the same rate. And you had a problem of overproduction. Gluts, an economic crisis created by abundance, is uniquely capitalist, right? I've said before, in systems of the past, people were hungry because there were food shortages. But only in the capitalist system do you have the economy crashing and people going hungry because there's too much food. In systems of the past, people were homeless because there wasn't enough housing to go around. But only under capitalism are people losing their jobs and homeless because there's too much housing. Right? I mean, only under capitalism do people go cold, get cold in the wintertime because there's too much heating gas. Right? I've told a million times, it's kind of like a cliche on these streams. I've told the coal miner's riddle, where little boy says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" Father says to the little boy, "Because we can't afford any coal to heat the stove." And the little boy says, "Father, why can't we afford any coal to heat the stove?" The father says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine. Now I'm unemployed and I don't have any money." The little boy says to his father, "Why did you lose your job at the coal mine?" You all know it. Because there's too much coal. That's capitalism. That's the problem of overproduction. The problem of overproduction. The third major problem with capitalism. However, the problem of overproduction that leads to the boom-bust cycle, that leads to crashes on the market and gluts and all of this insanity, leads to yet another problem. Right? So we went over this, that the capitalist extracts his profits from the surplus value that the worker creates, right? That the worker puts this much value into it, and it's from the percentage of the value of the product that is put into it by the worker from which the capitalist derives his profits. Well, the capitalist cannot cut into the shipping costs. That's a fixed rate. The capitalist cannot cut in to the, supplies. That's a fixed rate. But he can cut in to the value created by the worker. So you have your fixed rate A, which is the supplies. You have your fixed rate B, which is the shipping. But then you have the value put in by the worker, C, C1, and you have the profits extracted by the capitalist, C2. Final cost is D. Here's the problem. Technology decreases the role of the worker in production. Technology decreases the role of the worker in production. The capitalist is constantly looking to advance technology. He wants to hire as few workers as he possibly can. He wants to make the workers that he does hire easier to replace. He wants them to just have to push a button. He doesn't want to have to train them too much. He wants to make the workers that he does hire easier to replace. And so the factor of C that is constantly going in to the final cost, D, is constantly being decreased. The percentage of the final cost. A, he cannot change. B, he cannot change. But with technology, he can decrease C. The capitalist can use technology to decrease the amount of labor costs that he has. However, his profits are also extracted from the labor costs. So when the percentage of labor costs in every product, when the role of the worker is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist can make on every product goes down. C is constantly decreasing, and the capitalist profits are extracted from C. The value in the product is created by human beings. Workers create the value. If you just had A and B, you wouldn't have a pen. But it's that labor, that human labor, that gives it value. And thank you. Human labor creates value. Machines do not create value. Machines are dead capital. The shipping costs, that's dead capital. The materials, that's dead capital. The value that the capitalist gets all comes from the human labor. So when you reduce the role of labor in production, the ability of the capitalist to extract value in the form of profits goes down. So as a result of that, the rate of profits that the capitalist is making for every pen that he sells is constantly decreasing. So in addition to the problem of overproduction, that the worker cannot buy back what he produces, the frequent gluts on the market being flooded with products that cannot be sold, it gets worse with technology because the capitalist suddenly the amount of profit percentage-wise that he's making on each product is constantly decreasing. And this is called the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, or the tendency of the falling rate of profit. The more technology advances, the lower the rate of profits that the capitalists make. The more technology advances, the fewer and fewer workers are on the assembly line. The ability of the workers to buy back the product goes down, and the rate of profit that the capitalist makes on the products also goes down. These are the four major problems with capitalist production. Production organized for profit has these four built-in problems that cannot be resolved as long as you have production organized for profit. When you have production organized for profit, you cannot overcome the problem of production organized for profit. The only way to resolve these problems is to have a society where production is not organized for profit, where the banks and the factories and the major industries and the centers of economic power are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. By asserting rational control and human reason over the means of production, by organizing the means of production rationally and forcing them with 5-year economic plans, you can actually ensure that growth continues. You don't have this problem. You can say, all right, we have this many people who need houses. All right, we have this many people in the house constructing business. You go build houses for these people. And it's done. Right? You can say, we need this much food to be produced, and we got this many people that are hungry. You hungry people over here, you get food, and you farmers, you go produce this food. That's what Stalin did with the 5-year plans, and it turned Russia into an industrial superpower. That's what they do today in China with their 5-year plans. And yes, they include the market. The market is included, but the market isn't dominant. The state-run industries and the state-run banks and the state-controlled mega corporations follow a common plan. And there is production rationally organized so that you don't have these problems. So what does this have to do with today? This is all very abstract. Today, we are living in the aftermath of a huge technological leap. The computer revolution has made those problems I just explained to you, the problem of overproduction, the problem of the tendency of the falling rate of profits, it has blown them to proportions that Karl Marx could only have dreamed of. You know, I've got theories of surplus value up here. I've got Grundrisse. I've got capital. This is what we're seeing today is something that Karl Marx could never have dreamed of. Right? Karl Marx complained about how workers were constantly being made into appendages of machines. Right? He talked about in Marx's day, they were transitioning from skilled craftsmen, wood carvers, candle makers, and these skilled craftsmen, basket weavers, to factories. And this is when Marx talks about alienated labor. That's what he's talking about. That basket weaver, a basket weaver. If you went back to the 1600s, there was a guy who was a basket weaver, and he made a basket, and he made baskets, and he made them all by himself. He acquired the materials, he had the tools, and he put it all together, and they were his baskets, and there was a little bit of his soul in every one of those baskets that he produced. And it was something that, he sat there and he made those baskets, and those baskets were his to produce, and then he sold them and he got paid for making the baskets. And he would see the final product, the basket. He would sit there and say, all right, I'm going to make a basket this way. I've done it this way for years. The longer he did it, the better at it he got. It was a spiritual thing almost, that the product that he created was a result of his creativity, and he put his soul into it, and it was unique. It was an expression of him. This was the skilled craftsman. But in Karl Marx's time, he was noticing that instead of having basket weavers who were skilled craftsmen, you were getting instead appendages to machines. You'd get a guy who stands there and he puts one part on the basket, and he puts one part on the basket, and he puts one part on the basket, and there's none of his soul is going into that product at all. Right? It's alienated labor. He's got nothing to do with those the person who works the Ford assembly line. He's not that car isn't an expression of his soul. That car isn't specially made. No, it's just he pushes the button, he pushes the button, he pushes the button. And this is when he talks about alienated labor. How the worker is being reduced to being an appendage to the machine. The skilled craftsman who puts his soul into it, it's being eliminated. This is a big part of what Karl Marx writes about in his economic manuscripts. But Karl Marx never would have dreamed of what's happening now, which is that it's not that the worker is being reduced to a machine. Now they got machines without appendages. Machines can sell stocks better than human beings can. Machines can play chess better than human beings can. Machines can do almost anything. You look at artificial intelligence, what they're able to do. We've got a situation here where the machines don't need human appendages anymore. That alienated factory worker who doesn't put his soul into what he does, doesn't get any spiritual fulfillment, doesn't have any relationship with the product, that's like an ancient problem. That's Karl Marx was talking about something that's like miles behind us. Now we're dealing with a situation where production goes on with almost no human involvement. There's almost no human involvement. And when there's no human involvement, when there's barely any human labor that goes into producing that product, first of all, the ability to sell that product is decreasing because wages are not being paid out. That's one problem. Problem number two, the capitalist can only extract profits from the value created by the worker. Human beings create value. Machines do not create value. Only human labor can create value. Right? As I told you, with this pen, the capitalist cannot change the cost of the shipping. The capitalist cannot change the cost of the materials. It's the human labor that creates value. And it's from the value put into it by human labor that the capitalist can extract his profits, his surplus value. And because human labor is the source of all wealth, and because the role of human labor in production is being drastically decreased, the profits of the capitalists are decreasing. You have the tendency of the falling rate of profit. The rate of profit they can get off of each product is decreasing. And there's no room for the worker at the assembly line. The ability of the worker to then buy back the product that's being produced is being decreased. All of this is built in. This is the built-in problems of capitalism. Go read Nelson Peary, The Future is Up to Us. This is an amazing book by an American Marxist, Nelson Peary, an African-American Marxist organizer, Nelson Peary. Great book about this very, very problem. Go read it. He talks about the tendency of the falling rate of profit, how human beings create value, not machines. And when you eliminate workers from production, the result is an economic crisis. In addition to that, go read Low Wage Capitalism by Fred Goldstein. Again, talks about this very problem, the tendency of the falling rate of profits, how the technological revolution is making capitalism unsustainable. Go read High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy. He explains this very, very problem. You can go read Towards Soviet America by William Z. Foster from the 1930s. He describes it in the very first chapter. He describes this very problem, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction. Production organized for profit, not social good. All of these problems are built into the capitalist mode of production. And the reason that U.S. society and the Western capitalist countries are in a crisis right now is because of the technological revolution. Under capitalism, poverty is created by abundance. Abundance creates poverty. The more that is created, the poorer people get. The coal miner's riddle. The child is cold, and they're cold in the winter because there's too much coal. This is the problem. This is the problem of the capitalist system. And these are complex ideas. They are not simple. But these are fundamental to understanding the society-wide crisis that we are in. And I know that this sounds really abstract and convoluted, but it's related to everything that's going on right now. It's related to everything that's going on right now. Great example. Ukraine. What's going on there? Why are we going all out in a war with Russia? Russia is a competitor on the oil and gas markets. Russia was a disaster after the fall of the Soviet Union. Their economy was devastated. But then Putin got in and he recentered the economy of Russia around state-controlled oil and natural gas. And Russia sells oil and gas on the international markets. And because Russia sells oil and gas on the international markets, they are a competitor with ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron. They are in competition with the most powerful entities in Western capitalism. Right? If you want to know the most powerful, who are the big players? You go to Wall Street, Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase. That's ExxonMobil. That's the Rockefellers. Read about the history of Chase Manhattan Bank. Right? And the Rockefellers. That's who that is. It's the Morgans and the Rockefellers. That's Chase Bank. Huge Wall Street bank. Biggest bank in America. That's who they are. British Petroleum, BP. Who is that? That's HSBC Bank. That's the London Stock Exchange. BP. You go down the line, the biggest bankers are the oil monopolists. The biggest economic entities are the oil monopolies. This global economy right now runs on fossil fuels. It runs on oil. And Russia is a major competitor with the Western oil bankers. And the profits of Western oil bankers are dependent on people buying oil from them. And if they can just buy them from Russia, that cuts into their profits. Russia is competing with them on the international markets. But what about supply and demand? The less oil that is on the international markets, the higher the price of oil. Did you know that? The more that oil is produced, the lower the cost. But when there's scarcity of oil, the costs go up. And this conflict with Russia is resulting in massive oil profits because there is now a scarcity, because Russian oil is being driven off the market by U.S. sanctions. Russian oil and Russian gas is being driven off the market. Because of that, the price of oil and the price of natural gas is going through the roof. And so the profits of ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron are being expanded by the false scarcity. And a competitor, Russia, is being driven off the market. This is what? This is production for profit. They don't extract that oil because they just need people to be able to drive their cars and trucks. No, they extract that oil, they refine it, they make gasoline, thermal cracking, they make it so they can sell it. This is what's happening. And I will read to you. I keep coming back to this particular passage because it's extremely important. Right? And this is from the Communist Manifesto of 1848. In these crises, there breaks out an epidemic that in all earlier epochs would have seemed an absurdity, the epidemic of overproduction. Society finds itself put back into a state of momentary barbarism. It appears as if a famine, a war of devastation had cut off every supply of subsistence. Industry and commerce seem to be destroyed. Why? Because there's too much civilization, because there's too much subsistence, too much industry, and too much commerce. The productive forces at the disposal of society no longer tend to the further development of the conditions of bourgeois property. On the contrary, they have become too powerful for these conditions by which they are fettered, and they soon overcome these fetters. They bring disorder into the whole of bourgeois society and endanger bourgeois property. When there are huge leaps in the means of production, when there's too much commerce, too much being produced, it leads to a huge economic crisis where the rate of profit on the part of the capitalists goes down. And how do the capitalists solve these crises? The conditions of bourgeois society are too narrow to comprise the wealth created by them. They get so good at producing wealth, so efficient with their technological leaps, that there becomes so much wealth that you have an economic crisis. There's so much housing created that people are suddenly homeless. There's so much food created that people are suddenly hungry. It's irrational. The conditions of bourgeois society become too narrow to comprise the wealth. They get so good at producing products, you get a problem. So Marx then goes on, how does the bourgeoisie get over these crises? On the one hand, by enforced destruction of a mass of productive forces, degrowth. And on the other hand, by the conquest of new markets and more thorough exploitation of the old ones. So you go and you wage a war and you beat down a country and you seize that country as a captive market. You force them to buy your products. You destroy your competitor, right? Conquest of new markets. More thorough exploitation of the old ones, meaning you drive down the wages of the worker. You drive down the living conditions. And then he says, that is to say, by paving the way for more extensive and more destructive crises and diminishing the means whereby crises are prevented, meaning that every time they get out of one of these capitalist crises, they make it even harder for them to get out of the next one. This is the problem of capitalism. Capitalism, production organized for profit, is leading Western civilization into a catastrophe. Because under capitalism, the only value that people have is their ability to sell their labor power. And if you can't sell your labor power to a boss, you don't have value. And that machines are replacing workers on the assembly line. In a rational society, self-driving cars would be a good thing. They would be great. It would mean that driving didn't have to be done. There'd be less work for everybody. But in our capitalist society, self-driving cars mean a disaster. It would mean millions and millions of people, truck drivers, cab drivers, losing their jobs, Uber drivers losing their jobs. It would mean no more traffic courts. It would mean no state highway patrolmen. It would be a disaster. No gas stations, self-driving cars, which would be a great thing in a rationally organized society because of production organized for profit, would be a society-wide disaster. This is the problem of capitalism. And this is why the United States is deteriorating into a low-wage police state. This is why they're desperate to have a war with Russia, desperate to have a war with China. This is why they are degrowing and trying to drive down the population, trying to decrease the number of people in the world, and trying to drive down living standards. This is the problem. It is rooted in the problems of the capitalist system. Technological advancements lead to economic crises under capitalism. The Great Depression of the 1930s was caused by the leaps in assembly line production of Henry Ford and others. And our long-term capitalist crisis that we have entered is rooted in the computer revolution and the huge technological leaps that we are living under. Capitalism cannot handle the technological innovations that we are currently seeing. This is what we need to understand. These are not simple concepts, but this is very, very important to understand. As technology advances, it becomes more and more important that we have a socialist economy, that we rationally organize production for social use, for societal good, rather than for the profits of a few. This is the problem of capitalism, and this is Marxism. This is what Marx wrote about in the Communist Manifesto that I just read to you from. It's what he wrote about in Capital. It's what Engels writes about in Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. This is important stuff. This is important stuff. We are witnessing the breakdown of capitalism. And the reason that Russia and China are rising, and the reason that countries around the world are continuing to develop and not having these problems, is because there is a non-capitalist world centered around China. China is at the center of an alternative economy that is emerging that does not have this problem. In China, the state controls the means of production. The means of production are forced to work in the interest of society overall, not in the interest of private owners. And so they can continue to have growth. My whole life I've been hearing, oh, China's about to have a big collapse. China's about to have a big collapse. Hasn't happened yet. 2015, they had a big stock market problem. Boom, their stock market was right back up the next week, because the government stepped in and they banned short selling, and they froze the selling of stocks in state-run industries, and And boom, I mean, it just kept going, right? This is the future. If you're going to have continuous economic growth, you have to get rid of production organized for profit. You have to get rid of capitalism. You have to have socialism. And that's what I would like people to understand. And this is an analysis that you're not going to get elsewhere. But these four things, we should all be able to explain them. The problem of production organized for profit, the problem of the general law of capitalist accumulation, the problem of overproduction, and the problem of the tendency of the falling rate of profit, or the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. These are four things that are very important. It's the only way you can understand what we are facing as a society right now. That's the only way you can understand it. Right now, because we are facing a long-term economic crisis, because we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made, because there are loads of working people who have no place at the assembly line, no place in the means of production, there is a fight going on in the ruling class. The oil bankers and monopolists, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies, the old New England money, and the Silicon Valley elite technocrats, the Silicon Valley fascists, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and those guys, they are trying to take control of the government and use the state to forcibly stabilize the capitalist economy with degrowth. That's what they're trying to do. They're saying we need to take control of the government and we need to forcibly degrow. We need to force everyone to consume less. We need to force everyone to accept lower wages. We need to degrow and just reduce consumption drastically, reduce the population to try and solve this problem of overproduction, to try and resolve this economic problem of poverty created by abundance. That's what they're trying to do. And this is called Malthusianism. That's what Malthus talked about, right? He said that, look, the population just gets too big sometimes. Marx said, no, the population doesn't get too big. Human beings are the creators of the value. So no, reducing the population does not solve the problem. Human beings create wealth. Human labor creates all value. The problem is that human labor is organized for profit and the production for profits. And we need to organize human labor rationally to unleash it to reach its highest potential. The problem isn't human beings. The problem is capitalism and its production organized for profit. Malthusianism is the idea that the economic crises are rooted in overpopulation. Overpopulation. That is what Malthusianism preaches. Whereas Marxism says the problem is the irrational capitalist system, the anarchy of production. And the Malthusian faction of the ultra-rich is battling to take control of the government of the United States, battling to take control of the government of Western Europe right now, because they think the way out of the crisis is degrowth, driving down the population, grinding people into poverty, creating a low-wage police state. That's what they want. Meanwhile, there's a lot of capitalists who would lose out in such a situation. The hotel chain owners, Bernie Marcus, the owner of Home Depot, the fracking companies. There's a lot of capitalists that would really lose out if they ground us into a reduced consumption economy. And so those capitalists are rallying around what they call the new right. Donald Trump in the United States and MAGA in the United States, the Brexit stuff in the UK, the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, the lower levels of capital, the industrialists, the manufacturers that aren't in with that elite club, aren't in with Silicon Valley and the big banks. They are rallying around the new right wing to try and push back against this Malthusian agenda. They believe in economic growth. They believe in economic growth because they want their profits to keep going. Whereas the higher levels of capital are sitting there and saying, in order to solve this crisis, we need to stabilize the economy, we need to degrow, and we need to stabilize the economy. The higher levels of capital want fascism. They want a tightly controlled capitalist economy that is based on degrowth and driving down the population, eliminating people, reducing, breeding people out, managing the economy closely. That's what they want. They're for the rule of the ultra monopolies and a highly, highly controlled capitalism. And the lower level capitalists at this point are libertarians. They want the government to just get out of the way. They hate labor unions. They hate labor laws. And they want to be able to just make lots of money, and they don't want the government to get in their way. So we got libertarian capitalists that just want to make money. And we've got managerial ultra-rich elements that want a kind of Bonapartist state to stabilize the economy. That's what we have going on in the United States right now. And right now, the main danger is very clearly the Malthusians. And their agenda, which I've been ranting against on here, in the name of environmentalism, they want to make people poor. Yeah, I do. But we'll talk about that. All right. And I answered that, but I'll answer it again. All right. And, they want to make people poor. And really what they want, if you look at what they want, if you look at what the Malthusian, the ultra-rich capitalists want, it's pretty clear if you listen to what the woke stuff is, right? In the name of climate change, everyone has to be poor. We have to reduce the population. We have to start punishing people for flying on airplanes and consuming too much. And, and we got to make sure people don't have children and all of that. They want that. In the name of worker cooperatives, this is the scary thing, right? They push this idea of worker cooperatives. No, socialism doesn't mean the state controls the means of production. No. Socialism doesn't mean the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good, Caleb. No. Socialism means that workers are partial owners of for-profit enterprises, right? So we're not getting rid of production organized for profit. We're not getting rid of capitalism. It's just that workers become co-owners, right? And this is what they want. If you really want to get down to it, this is what the ultra-rich want. They want an absolute monopoly for Walmart. They want an absolute monopoly for Amazon. They want an absolute monopoly for Google and Facebook. But all the employees there are technically co-owners, meaning that they don't get a paycheck every week. They get a stock dividend. They get an employee stock option. And you're a co-owner, and they call it socialism. But it's not socialism. It's just incentive pay, right? Social Ecology, developed by Murray Bookchin. And they want incentive pay, right? And so imagine a society. This is the high-tech dark ages that the Malthusian, woke imperialists and ultra monopolists have for us. Imagine a society where there are no small businesses. They've all been eliminated. All the small businesses have been eliminated. Everyone works for Amazon or Google or Facebook or Walmart. Everyone works for one of these major companies, but they're all co-owners, meaning that you don't know what your wages are going to be, because if the stock doesn't rise, if Walmart's stock doesn't go up, your paycheck gets lower. Right? So imagine that you're a co-owner. All the workers are co-owners at Amazon, co-owners at Walmart. Thanks. Thank you. I'm doing great. Meanwhile, anybody who questions the ruling party line immediately gets canceled. Meaning that if you work at Google, you work at Facebook, you work at one of these companies, and if you say, I don't agree with what the government's doing in Ukraine, or I don't agree with this transgender thing or something, immediately you're fired, you lose your job, you're kicked off of social media, you're kicked out of your housing, and immediately society just boycotts you, right? Because you are a bad person. And we have this strict code of conduct that everyone must follow. And everyone's monitoring everybody else. And if it's determined that you're not a good person, we don't throw you in jail, we don't execute you, but society stops doing business with you. You become boycotted, and your employer gets rid of you, and your housing kicks you out, and companies won't sell you products, and society boycotts you, and people get points for turning each other in. Right? And that's another thing, right? Is that if you catch somebody saying that what the government's doing in Ukraine is wrong, or disagreeing with this woke policy or whatever, you get points. So people are constantly, not only is everyone a co-owner, not an employee, but on top of that, everyone is constantly looking for everyone else, right? Actively tearing other people down and looking for thought criminals and dissidents and all of that. Meanwhile, the society is constantly at war. There's a constant state of war against Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, Vietnam, any society that's broken out of Western capitalism. And the population is constantly being psyched up to go to war with those countries. Meanwhile, the government is actively reducing the population. Actively reducing the population. People get punished if they have children. They're actively encouraging suicide, right? This is the vision, right? Degrowth, constant war, unrestricted rule by the ultra monopolies, a cancel culture police state where if you think wrong, society, you get unwelcome in society, you're cast out, you have no place in society. This is the fascist state that the ultra Malthusians are dreaming up. This is what they are trying to create. And they are going to call it, they might want to call it democratic socialism. There's nothing socialist about this. Nothing socialist about this. This is a high-tech dark ages that they are trying to create. And it's terrifying. And this is what they want to create. This is what they want to build in the United States right now. They want to build this society. This is the blueprint that they have drawn up. There's different versions of it, but if you read, with the World Economic Forum, this is what they have decided. This is what they want. Right? They want this fascism. And this is a lot like Benito Mussolini and, the corporate statism, right? And they pulled the worker, a lot of interesting things. That worker cooperative shit, right? Where we don't get rid of production organized for profit. We just, make every worker an employee. They did that in Mussolini's Italy. It was called the corporate state. They did that in Franco's Spain. They called it national syndicalism, right? This is what fascists do, right? Is they don't want to get rid of capitalism. They don't want to get rid of production organized for profit. They just want a highly controlled capitalism in which they are degrowing rapidly and constantly waging war in order to keep the system stable. This is Nazi Germany. This is fascist Italy. This is Franco's Spain. This is what they want. This is what the ultra rich want at this point. This is what they want. And the lower level capitalists, they don't want it because it eliminates them. It would eliminate them. They wouldn't have a role anymore. They would be eliminated. The lower level capitalists, they believe in economic growth. They just want to make money. They just want to make money. They don't like this high-tech dark ages, so they're resisting it. They want libertarian economics. But who else is against this? The labor movement. Chris Smalls. He's fighting for the little guy. He's fighting for those Amazon workers. And no, he doesn't want them to just get a stock dividend. He wants them to get a decent wage. He wants them to get paid enough doing their delivery work or their warehouse work. He wants them to get paid enough that they can take home a decent check and raise a family, have children. Amazon doesn't want you to have children. They want the population to go down. But Chris Smalls is organizing the Amazon workers. So labor also is resisting this high-tech dark ages. And who else is resisting this high-tech dark age? China. China wants growth. China wants to increase the population, wants to raise living standards, wants more wealth, wants China to have countries to trade with. Russia wants to increase and see living standards go up. All of Africa wants living standards to go up. They want more power plants and electricity. They want more of an economy. When you look into it, there is a block emerging. In the Chinese Revolution, they called it a block of four classes. You ever heard of this? The block of four classes. If you look at the Chinese flag, they got the big star, that's for the Communist Party, and then they got the four stars for the block of the four great classes, right? The peasantry, the proletariat, the middle class, and the national capitalists. And the Communist Party led them all for the liberation of the country. Well, now we're having a block, a global block of resistance to imperialism. The lower level capitalists that don't want to be demolished economically, the working class and the labor movement. And on top of that, you've got the anti-imperialist countries and the oppressed countries around the world that want to raise themselves up. And the linchpin, the central belief that will ultimately bind this coalition together is belief in economic growth. There's the degrowth faction, the Malthusian ultra-rich, the decaying imperialists, the technocratic elites of decaying Western capitalism that are trying to stabilize and degrow in order to keep the world poor so they can stay rich. And then there are the working class and the developing world and the lower level capitalists. And this united front against decaying imperialism, against the global financial system, the global capitalist system, the ultra monopolies, the imperialists, this is the way out. This is the way out. This united front. And ultimately, the working class is going to be the most important part of this united front. In the Western capitalist countries, yes, lower level capitalists are going to be part of it. Yes, people who want to trade with the countries around the world and their struggle for national liberation, they're going to be part of it. But ultimately, it's going to be working people saying, we will not be canceled. It's going to be working class people saying, we want to have children. We want more than we had before. We want our lives to get better. We want better housing. We want better living conditions. We're not going to die from opioids. We're not going to die from suicide. We're not going to be brainwashed by all the pessimism that you're spewing at us with your phones. We are going to live. It's that drive to survive, that human will to survive. That is going to be the thrust of it. And it's going to be millions of working class people saying, I refuse to surrender, and I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to wake up every day, and I'm not going to just become another cog in your machine to be eliminated. I'm going to assert my human creativity. I'm going to assert my ability to live for something higher than myself. It's going to be working class people, those who create the value, the human labor, the labor that creates all wealth. It's going to be the working class that is at the center of the coalition. The class that creates. They are going to be at the center of this anti-Malthusian, anti-imperialist, anti-monopolist united front that is going to break apart the power of the big monopolies and unleash economic growth. They are going to demand a government of action that fights for working families, a government that breaks apart Amazon, that breaks apart Walmart, that breaks apart ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron, and takes control of the means of production, not to try and stabilize capitalism, but instead to rationally organize the economy to unleash human power and growth. That is going to be what has to happen. That's what has to happen here. And we will win. You know, it's like that Jurassic Park movie I always talk about, Life Found a Way, right? This is what happens. Every so often you get in a rut. You get into a point, and then human beings adjust. We adjust to our environment. And we are going to innovate our way out of this. And socialism will prevail. And the decaying capitalism of the West that is degenerating into this new weird degrowth woke fascism is going to be defeated. And that's the situation that we are in the world today. I hope this is helpful. I'm trying to get people to understand it. I'm explaining the problem. I started out explaining the problems of capitalism, and then explained the divisions in the ruling class. And now I'm explaining what's going to come out of it, which is that there is going to be a block of classes, of different classes, that will resist. And their fundamental belief will be in historical progress and economic growth. And I believe that those of us watching this stream will be a big part of it. But these are tough times to live in. So that should give you a lot to think about. I've got a few super chats written down. In the second half of the show, we're going to do some super chats. We're going to answer some super chats. But if you got any more super chats for me to talk about in the second half of the show, that would be good. But I want to show two clips here before we get to our roll call and finishing up. This is a long stream tonight, but it's good. We need to have a nice long stream. I'm having a great time. There's a great number of you here, and we're doing great stuff here. But this was Jonathan Blazer and the leader of the People's Party, right? Nick Brana. They confronted Bernie Sanders about his support for the imperialist war and the escalation of the crisis in Ukraine. I just wanted to show the great work that they did here. This is awesome. The amount of people, I am so amazed with the folks from the Schiller Institute, with Nick Brana and Jonathan Blazer, the People's Party, and all the people that have been going out there and calling out the progressives for their support for war. This is great work. So here we go.
Is about our economy.
Bernie, you're leading us to nuclear war! Bernie, you're going to start a nuclear war!
To billionaires and then cut Social Security.
Ukraine, Bernie!
Their fair share of taxes.
This is pointless if we have a nuclear war! You will kill us all!
From a minimum wage to a living wage.
We trusted you! You were supposed to lead a revolution! Your leaders would not have
Unlimited amounts of money.
Bernie,
the money.
Where is our money going? You're sending money to Nazis in Ukraine.
We're not going to let people disrupt our meeting. So
why did you oppose the letter? Oppose the president on sending money? You're starting a nuclear war with
the billionaire class, the billionaire class.
You were supposed to start a political revolution. Instead, you're sending money. You're starting a third world war, Bernie.
Why are you voting to fund a nuclear war, Bernie? Why are you voting to fund a nuclear war, Bernie? You answer our question.
Why? No one.
Who is paying you?
No one.
Be honest.
No one. The people are paying me, Bernie. Why does someone have to be paid by Russia or someone else to oppose the war, Bernie? Why does someone have to do that? Bernie, why are you paying for it? Why are you funding Nazis in Ukraine, Bernie? Why?
Yeah, good work. They confronted Bernie Sanders, right? And how dare he say, who's paying you? You know, who's paying you? Oh boy. But I also wanted to show this clip. Wanted to show this clip here because, you know, again, this is an example, right? Carrie Lake would probably not agree with me on very much, but there is an uprising going on in this country right now against the Malthusian agenda of the ultra rich. And Carrie Lake, she's a hardcore MAGA Republican. She says that she feels that the election of 2020 was rigged. You know, that Trump was robbed of his victory in Arizona. She feels there was voter fraud, and they consider her to be a big threat because she says that. And she's running for governor of Arizona. And you know, this is a speech she gave. And again, you know, this speech, I mean, it's not where we're at politically, but if you watch it, it is the "we will not be canceled" sentiment. There's a reason she's talking this way, and this is very important. I'm telling you, the uprising is people saying they don't want to be canceled, they don't want to be eliminated. This is Kari Lake. So this is Kari Lake at CSPAC. This is the woman who's probably going to be the new governor of Arizona, according to the polls. And this is her speech. Don't so much think about, you know, about what she's saying. Think about why she's saying it, because this is what people want to hear.
Pictures of them. They park outside of our house. These people are evil bastards. Just look at what they put President Trump and his family through for 7 years. He's got the globalists against him. He's got the fake news against him. He's got the left against him. And he's even got some people in our own party against him. We call them the rhinos. Now, listen, I feel for him because I actually got a taste of it myself. I actually kind of understand what it feels like to be President Trump. It's not fun. It's not fun at all. So one day I called him and I said, Mr. President.
Now, what's important? Why is she talking this way? Because working people in America feel like Donald Trump, right? Just like she's saying that Donald Trump had the media against him, the left against him, and all that. Working people have their employers against them, trying to pay them as little as they possibly can. They've got a police state coming down on them. They've got lockdowns, destroying their jobs and communities. They got big pharmaceutical companies that are, that are pushing opioids. They've got cancel culture, telling them they're bad people and making them afraid to say what they want. Working people identify with Trump because they see that this establishment that is destroying their lives and grinding them into poverty also hates Donald Trump. And so they identify with it. That's why Kari Lake is she's talking that way, because working people feel it. They're tired of being canceled politically, economically, socially. Millions of working people feel like they're canceled. And so when she gets up there and she talks about how she's like Trump and everyone's against him, and they identify with it.
They are giving me the Trump treatment. And he stopped me right there and he said, Kari, don't stop. That means you are directly over the target.
And they agree with her. They want to be with somebody who's against this system that's coming down on people. They want to be with somebody that's against the media, against the big corporations. Even if it's fake demagogy, the people that are rallying around MAGA, they feel society coming down hard on them, and they want to resist.
So I'm feeling pretty strong right now. But they tell me what's about to come at me, it's about to get even worse, even more painful. And you know what I say to them? Bring it on. Bring it on. I welcome the vitriol. I welcome the strife. I welcome the attacks. And
Sounds an awful lot like President Roosevelt, doesn't it? 1936 in Madison Square Garden, President Roosevelt said, "Never before have they been so united in a candidate, and I welcome their hatred." This is strength. This is what people are attracted to. They're not attracted to people who cower before the cancel culture. They're not attracted to people who are just like, oh, I better change my views so I can fit in. Oh, I better think what everyone else is thinking. No, they love people that are like, bring it, motherfuckers. That's what they like, right? People that challenge the powerful, people that are pushing back against the prevailing narrative, people who are saying we won't be canceled. That's who working people like, because they're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their humanity.
Welcome every bit of it with ultimate gladness. You know why? because this fight before us proves to us that God is with us. He has chosen me, and he has chosen you.
Oh my God. There's a higher purpose in life. Everything's not just pointless and hopeless. It's all just not meaningless. There's actually right and wrong in the universe. There's something worth fighting for. There's something worth dying for. Oh my God, she's a Nazi. Oh my God, right and wrong don't exist. Oh no, she can't say that. Oh, see, again, I'm with you, Carrie. I'm with you. I'm with you in spirit. And that's what they're cheering for. Principle, right and wrong, the idea that there's something worth sacrificing for, there's something worth taking risks for. That's what they're cheering when they're cheering Carrie Lake, right? You can say, oh, I don't agree with her religion or whatever. That's not what this is about. This is about postmodernism. This is about the bullshit they're teaching on the campuses. And this is them rejecting it. And they're saying, no, God is with us. God has a plan. Right and wrong exist. This is good shit, folks. Put your religious beliefs or your thoughts about religion aside. That's what they're cheering for.
And I don't believe for 1 second that God makes mistakes. You guys agree with that? He has placed each and every one of here at this point in history because he knows our strength. He's placed us here because he knows that we will be the ones to save this great republic.
Wow, life has a purpose, a destiny, something to sacrifice for.
Absolutely. Now, this is where it's going to get a little difficult because I think we got to start welcoming people in. We got to welcome in, obviously, any patriot who loves this country, right? You're welcome into the movement. We're going to...
Right. Loves the country, meaning you love the economy of the country, meaning you don't want to collapse the U.S. economy into a global open economic system, right? You want to preserve this country's economy. You want to unleash economic growth. You want to preserve the industries. You want economic growth, right? When she says loyalty to the country, she's in loyalty to the communities.
Welcome the conservatives, but not just the conservatives. We've got to welcome in the independents. And we need to welcome in any Democrat disillusioned with the dead-end ideas of the Democrat Party. And let me tell you, there are millions of them out there. We've got to welcome them into this party as they walk away. We need to say, welcome to the Republican Party, the party of we, the people. I know they want us to think it is a battle between left and right, but this is truly a battle between those who want to save America and those who want to destroy her.
Yep, between those who want a prosperous economy with economic growth, they want to rejuvenate the country, and those who want a low-wage police state, those who want an open international system, right? When she says save America, she doesn't mean saving racism. She doesn't mean saving slavery. She doesn't mean saving Confederate monuments. Get the woke mindset out of your head. She means saving your neighborhood, right? This is the lower levels of capital that still believe in economic growth, rallying their troops against the technocratic Malthusian core.
That's where we are at this moment. My question to you is, are you in this fight with us? Are you ready to fight? Because we need each and every person to be in this foxhole with us. We all have to be willing to take the same hits that I've taken and that President Trump has taken. That means we got to be willing to put our job on the line. Who's had to do that? A few people out here. I see hands have gone up. We got to be willing to put our paycheck on the line. I know how that feels. It's not fun. We have to be willing to be attacked, and we got to be willing to lose a friend or two.
Yep.
50.
Yep.
I think I've lost about 150.
Me too. Me too. But you got to be able to take a stand. You got to be able to fight back. This is what she's saying. And the reason they're all rallying around it, people are sick and tired. People are sick and tired of the woke social media brainwashing that's making everyone stupid.
We have to be willing to be kicked off of Twitter. Don't you think that our founding fathers lost a lot more than a Twitter account? They lost their livelihoods, they lost their fields, they lost their homes. Those were torched. They had their families destroyed for what they believed in. Some of them even gave their lives fighting for this country. For them, America was just an idea. For us, America has been a reality. And it is up to us to ensure that America does not become a memory.
She's rejecting the low-wage police state, rejecting the sinister degrowth, high-tech dark ages of capitalism and decay.
This is our moment right now to prove to our ancestors that their struggles and losses were not done in vain. It is our moment to prove right now how much this country means to us. And I'm willing to take that sacrifice. And I know that you in this room are willing to take that sacrifice, because I want to tell you something. My father was a history teacher, high school history teacher. And nobody looks back on history on those who were unscathed. They're not even remembered. It is only those of us who have the scars who will be remembered. Those of us with the scars of battle, those of us with the scars of persecution that will make history. We may have won this battle, and I won an epic battle in Arizona. We drove a stake through the heart of the McCain machine.
Yeah, the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party. John McCain, who never saw a foreign entanglement he didn't like. She's cheering that they defeated the neocon McCain machine in Arizona.
I felt like I had to wear garlic around my neck when I did that. So my question is, are you ready to fight a few battles? Who's up for it? We need to fight like hell to take this country back. I know that the man standing back there is willing to do it. I know I'm in this battle and willing to do it. Who is ready to rise up and go out there and win this war to save America? Let me hear you. Thank you, CPAC.
Well, it's a great speech, and spiritually, I'm with her. I'm angry about what's happened to communities like the one I grew up in. I'm angry about the opioid epidemic. I'm angry about the crumbling infrastructure and the lack of basic. I mean, the roads are falling apart. I mean, the economy is miserable. The low wages, the declining living standards. I don't want to see the United States destroyed. I'm angry about the foreign wars. I'm angry about the fact that we're heading toward a low-wage police state. I'm angry about all of that. But she will not be able to defeat any of that with free market capitalism. Libertarianism ain't going to solve any of that. If you want to stop the low-wage police state, if you want to rejuvenate the economy of the United States, you need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what you need. And free market policies, anti-labor policies, that's not going to get it for you. You need a government of action to fight for working families. If you want to fight for the country, if you want to protect the country from the breakdown of capitalism, if you want to have growth again, if you want to see people rise up, the people in her audience, spiritually, I'm with them. I understand. They want to have a prosperous country. They don't want to be canceled. I'm with them spiritually. But they don't understand economics. They need to understand. They need to understand that at the end of the day, we need a government of action to fight for working families. And China and Russia and Cuba and Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Vietnam are our allies. Nicaragua are our allies against the global monopolist bankers that are destroying the United States and trying to grind this country into poverty, right? There is a global fight going on against the monopolists and the decaying Western capitalist system. And I think a lot of the people in the Trump camp, they are starting to realize that the FBI is not their friend. They're starting to realize that the Pentagon is not their friend. They're starting to realize that the big monopoly corporations are not their friends, but they don't know what the answer is. Well, that's why I'm here, and that's why you're here, and that's why we've got a job to do, and it's not going to be easy, right? These are difficult times to live in, folks, and we've got a job to do. We've got our work cut out for us. So on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. I got Bill in Maryland. Exactly, Bill Bradley. I got Ryan in Oakland, class analysis. Oldenburg, Germany. It must be late over there. Wow. We got Brad in St. Louis. We got Hakeem in Idaho. We got Rice from Adelaide, Australia. We got Tyler in Missouri. We got Auckland, New Zealand. We got Redneck Red in West Virginia. Enoch in Australia. Steve in Georgia. We got West Virginia, Sydney. We got Johannes in Rotterdam. We got Judas in Boston. Chandler in Georgia. Northern California. We got Jared in Virginia. We got Colin in Greensboro, North Carolina. Joe in Jersey City. We got Gavin in Western Illinois. We got Portland, Oregon. We got Caitlin Thong from Chicago. Caitlin Thornog from Chicago. We got John Whitty in Houston. We got Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Clyde in Melbourne. We got David from Michigan. Very, very good. We got Wisconsin. We got Steve Temple in Wisconsin. We got Klasnaki Jake from NYC. We got John McCarthy in Chicago. Shout out to you. We got Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. We got Charlie in South Florida. We got JT24 from Mississippi. Yeah, this is great. This is great stuff, folks. Great stuff. This is good. This is good stuff. This is great. We got Cleveland Pirate Alex. We got Mark in Syracuse. We got Kieran in San Diego. Shout out to you, Kieran. Glad that you're with us tonight. Good to have you. Good to have you. We got JT24 saying hello, people. We got Micah in Las Vegas. We got Jake from Sacramento. Yeah, this is good stuff, folks. I'm so glad to be back. We're going to be trying to stream as much as we possibly can these days. We got hard work. We got work to do, and we got shit to do. And yeah, good times. All right. Got Alan in South Korea. There we go. All right, folks. So now I'm going to answer the super chat questions. First one is about James Burnham and the managerial revolution. Well, James Burnham is somebody that you can read about in this book, which it's a Trotskyite book, but it's kind of important, The Struggle for the Proletarian Party, right? The neocon Trots, the Trotskyites who eventually became neocons, they were a faction among Trotskyism in the United States based in New York City. They were the New York intellectuals. And they were led by Max Shachtman, James Burnham, and Martin Aburn. And they were the leaders of the New York City Trotskyites. And they turned against the Soviet Union. And James Burnham was a college professor, and he was a leader of this faction, the Shachtmanite faction, right? You had Max Shachtman, James Burnham, and Martin Aburn. And James Burnham was a leader of the Shachtmanite Trotskyites. And he came up with the theory that the Soviet Union was neither capitalist or socialist. He argued that there was a new system that had been created, and this new system was not capitalist or socialist, but the rule of technocrats, the rule of managers. There was a new class of bureaucrats. Max Shachtman called it bureaucratic collectivism. James Burnham called it the managerial class, but he argued that the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany and fascist Italy were neither capitalist or socialist, that it wasn't the working class that was in power in the Soviet Union, but it also was not the capitalist class. It was the managers and technicians. That was the theory. And it was a lot of Trotskyites promoted, and James Burnham, he wrote The Managerial Revolution. And after World War II, he just became a right-wing neocon. He became, I think he wrote for Reader's Digest. He just became a right-winger. But his departure from Trotskyism was this third camp position. And the problem with that theory is that capitalism is not simply defined by inequality. Capitalism is not defined by inequality. Capitalism is not defined by a lack of democratic participation on the part of the worker. Capitalism is defined by production organized for profit. That's very clear that in the Soviet Union, production was not organized for profit. They had state central planners and 5-year plans that were organizing the economy. And in the United States and in Nazi Germany, it was organized for profit. Though there was a high level of state involvement to facilitate it, it was still organized for profit, and the profits were still going to private owners. And the bureaucrats who managed the economy were accountable to the capitalist private owners. And that's the issue. And that, yes, state managers and bureaucracy, especially amid an economic crisis, they become very important. But it's still capitalism if production is organized for profit. And if the working class takes power, the working class is going to have some kind of bureaucracy, right? There's going to have to be government officials and managers. But if they're accountable to a working class movement, if they're representatives of an organized working class party, they don't become a new class. And actually, one of the points that Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, who directly dealt with these people hated Sam Marcy, right? James Burnham, Sam Marcy, from what I understand, he and James Burnham, they were in the New York City Trotskyites. They knew each other and they did not like each other. And Sam Marcy argued with these people. He argued for the orthodox Trotskyite, position, right? And he fought against the New York City Trotskyites. And one point that Sam Marcy made when he debated James Burnham was that Sam Marcy said that if there was some kind of other class that had managed to seize the means of production from the capitalists and overthrow the rule of profits, even if it wasn't the working class, that would be a good thing. I mean, first, the entire premise of the argument is wrong. So if there is this new class that has emerged, this professional managerial class that's neither capitalist nor worker, and they've managed to overthrow the capitalists and seize control of the means of production, and they've eliminated production organized for profit, that would be good. And if you think about it, yeah, it would. If there was a new class that could overthrow capitalism, seize control of the means of production, eliminate production organized for profit, why would you as a Marxist not support it? So the very premise of their argument, which is this idea that, well, the Soviet Union's not socialist, it's actually worse than capitalism, and it's just like Nazi Germany, it's this new progressional managerial class. If that were true, that would be a progressive development because they were getting beyond the rule of profits. But in Nazi Germany, they clearly weren't. And in the Soviet Union, it was a working class revolutionary party that had seized power. And yes, there was a bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy in the Soviet Union was somewhat parasitical. The Soviet bureaucrats, they drove fancy cars and had fancy apartments, and they, your top manager of an industry in the Soviet Union might make 100 times what the average worker makes. But under capitalism, your average CEO makes 100,000 times what your average worker makes. And what that CEO is making is extracted from the labor of the worker. Whereas in the Soviet Union, that bureaucrat gets a much higher pay than your average worker, but it comes out of the same general surplus. And if the productive forces increase, and if the wages of the average worker go up, then the wages of the bureaucrat goes up. So it's a different kind of relationship. that the Soviet bureaucracy, the privileged bureaucracy of the Soviet Union, which certainly existed, and it's a problem you're going to have in a socialist country. You're always going to have a bureaucracy until you reach that final goal of communism. You're going to have party bureaucrats. You're going to have, people, in the government, and they're going to be compensated, and you're going to have this problem. But they are not capitalists in that they are not extracting, they are not controlling the means of production in order to advance their own profits. And they instead share in the overall wealth of society. They just claim a bigger share for themselves because of their bureaucratic position or their bureaucratic privilege. And this has actually been a really big problem for the socialist countries, the problem of bureaucracy, because it seems contradictory, right? We're fighting for the working class. So, why do we have new people that come in? And actually, the great analogy, right? If you think about, imagine there's a shortage of food. Imagine that you have a shortage of food someplace. In order to make sure that everyone has enough food, you're going to have to ration the food, right? So you're going to have to divide it. You only have so much bread. You're going to have to break the bread into so many different pieces and make sure that everyone gets a piece of bread. You're going to have to ration the food. But if you're going to ration the food like that, you're going to have a guard. You're going to have somebody who enforces the rationing of the food, make sure somebody else doesn't steal somebody else's food. Well, that guard is taking on the responsibility, the unpleasant task of being the guard and making sure no one takes anybody else's food. So that guard is going to demand that he gets a bigger piece of food, because he's going to say, look, everyone in the line is getting their ration, but I not only am in the line, I have to be the guard and enforce this. So I'm going to demand a bigger piece of bread. That's bureaucracy. And you have that. Every socialist country has a bureaucracy, and it's a problem. And how do you control the bureaucracy? And what Stalin was trying to do, as awful as things got in the 1930s, the Great Terror and the secret police and that was Stalin trying to control the bureaucracy. Didn't work out too well, right? And Yezhov was trying to the Yezhov-Shina, the Great Terror in 1937. That was largely Stalin and the secret police were trying to control the bureaucracy and make sure the bureaucracy remained loyal to the revolution, didn't sell out the revolution. Meanwhile, the Cultural Revolution in China. What was the Cultural Revolution in China? That was Mao mobilizing the young people, the Red Guards, to go out and stay on top of the bureaucracy and demand that the bureaucracy stay loyal to the revolution. That didn't work too well either. The Cultural Revolution was a nightmare in China. Well, now socialist countries have realized that rather than trying to terrorize the bureaucracy with police repression like Stalin, rather than trying to terrorize the bureaucracy with mobs of Red Guard teenagers beating them up and chaos in the streets like Mao did with the Cultural Revolution, the best thing to do is to have a market sector. If people want to get rich, don't have them go into the bureaucracy. Have them start their own business. Save the bureaucracy for those who are ideologically loyal to it. In order to keep the bureaucracy loyal, you have to make it so that people don't go into the bureaucracy because they want to get rich. Make a private sector. If people want to get rich, they go into the private sector. But the recipe for disaster in the Soviet Union and China was that in order to get rich in the Soviet Union or Mao's China, the only way you could get rich was by joining the bureaucracy. Well, what are you going to get? All the self-serving people that don't really give a fuck about communism are then going to join the bureaucracy. So you need a private sector so that self-serving people that want to get rich can go into the private sector. And you keep the bureaucracy for people who believe in the revolution, who believe in communism, people who believe in the party. And you keep the bureaucracy not as a place for people to get rich, but as a place for the goals of the revolution to be enforced. And then you do, control that bureaucracy. It's kind of fascinating, right? If you go to Iran, you go to, China, you go to Venezuela, there is a layer of people that are very loyal to the revolution, are very dedicated and fanatical. And then you have a layer of people that are more or less indifferent, but sympathetic, that think, I'm not really a communist. I'm not really an Islamic revolutionary. I'm not really a Bolivarian, but, they've done a lot of good things. I might not like some things that they do, but they've made things better in a lot of ways. And then you have another layer of people that are somewhat hostile, that are like, no, they messed it up, and cynical. And it's about a third, a third, a third. That was my experience in Iran. That was my experience in Venezuela. But it's that first third of people that are dedicated and fanatical and loyal, who will give their lives to the revolution. That's the party, right? That's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. That's the colectivos in Venezuela. That's what keeps the revolution intact. And those people are the bureaucracy largely, right? The Communist Party in China, that's the bureaucracy. It's all party members, right? And those people are loyal. Party members are the most disciplined and loyal, and they've studied, and it's really, to be accepted into the party is a huge accomplishment that many people do not achieve and try to achieve and fail. It's a very difficult thing to get into the party, and you have to understand the ideology, and and you look at the Islamic Revolutionary Guards of Iran, you look at the Bolivarian militias, the collectivos, and all of that. Those folks, they run the bureaucracy, and they are dedicated. But the self-serving people don't join the bureaucracy anymore. And that's the problem. The problem in the Soviet Union, the problem in Mao's China, was that the only place that you could advance was in the bureaucracy. And that's a recipe for disaster, right? And in Cuba, actually, today, they talk about how in the 90s in Cuba, the bureaucracy actually had less, right? When there were food shortages in Cuba, the party people that were the leaders, that were the bureaucrats, had less than average people. In North Korea, during the arduous march, they assigned, when they had food shortages, they assigned people, the food they would get based on their job. And in some cases, the coal miners had bigger food rations than the government bureaucracy, because they needed those coal miners to mine that coal to keep the power plants running. And that in some cases you can see the bureaucracy having less than the population when there's a serious crisis, and that's the recipe for doing these things, right? Is that you need a very dedicated, loyal bureaucracy, and then you need a market sector for the people who just want to get rich and move ahead, be their own boss or be somebody else's boss, right? Yeah, and that's the problem of bureaucracy. And I think this is one of the strengths of 21st century socialism, and it solves one of the big problems of 20th century socialism, which was the problem of how do you control the bureaucracy? Well, it seems like this is the answer. Now, obviously, there's problems. There's corruption in China, and they have their mass lion campaign and all of that. But this is a way that one of the big problems of 20th century socialism has been dealt with. Next question. All right. Thoughts on Ted Kaczynski's critique of leftism? I thought it was brilliant. Ted Kaczynski is an awful person. He's an anti-industrial person. He's a murderer. He's one of these primitivists. He wants to go back to the, Mother Nature, and anti-human and a psychopath. He's an awful person, right? And honestly, he's a product of some evil stuff that was done to him. I mean, they traumatized him. I mean, if you look at the psychological experiments they did on him when he was a young person, it's pretty evil. He was a very highly intelligent person, and there's a whole story there you can look into. But regardless, not a good dude, but his critique of leftists, of political correctness, I thought it was brilliant. Actually, it's one of the most, he wrote it in the 80s, I believe, right? I believe he wrote it in the 1980s. And he was talking about how leftism is not synonymous with socialism anymore. It's synonymous with a lot of the things we see now: virtue signaling, political correctness, and, over socialization and weakness, right? This desire to gain the approval of others. I thought it was kind of insightful. All right. I don't endorse Ted Kaczynski in any way. He was, his beliefs, to be against industrial, he's anti-human, basically. it's anti-human ideology, but there you go. All right. No gossip and intrigue allowed. Well, you have to do it sometimes, okay? But I'm sick of it. I'm weary of all the bullshit, right? Look, we just had a 2-hour conversation on here. We just did, where we talked about the problems of capitalism. We talked about the divisions in the ruling class and That was far more productive than any bitch slap fight I ever had with Jason, or any, screaming back and forth I did with BreadTube. Like, this is like, we're actually learning stuff here, and we're understanding the society we live in, etc. All right. Kim.com is talking about the collapse of Western civilization is a proxy war against Russia. Well, they need to conquer new markets. They need to drive Russia off the market. And they need to create false scarcity in terms of oil and gas in order to drive the prices up and make profits. They are trying to make, profits for their system, so there you go. Yeah, I mean, he's right about that. It's about oil profits, driving the oil prices high, making a killing for oil bankers by driving Russia off the markets. It's about removing a competitor. It's about seizing new markets for the Western imperialists, pushing Russia out of the international markets. It's about trying to weaken Russia by forcing them to get involved in Ukraine, and forcing them into a situation where they have to intervene in Ukraine, and then as a result, they have consequences. This comes from the Brzezinski. It's a lot like the Afghan trap. They forced the Soviet Union to have to militarily intervene in Afghanistan, and then they prolonged the war in Afghanistan as long as they possibly could to hurt the Soviet Union. That's what they're doing here. Russia did everything they could possibly do not to intervene in Ukraine. And they pushed it, 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 and they pushed it to the point where Russia had no choice. They had to intervene. And now the United States is trying to keep it going as long as they possibly can. They're pouring billions of dollars in weapons in there, and they're saying, drive the oil prices up, keep the Pentagon contractors and weapons manufacturers making money, weaken Russia, use this as an excuse to push Russia out of the international markets. That's what this is about. They are trying to save their system with war and destruction, right? Fascism and war, right? Capitalism in decay leads to fascism and war. Only socialism and the public ownership of the means of production can lead the way out. All right, what's going on in Haiti right now? Well, the fuel prices in Haiti, are devastated people. In Haiti, these high gas prices mean that people don't get as much food. In Haiti, they talk about people who eat dirt mixed with oil, right? They talk about, the amount of poverty. People are like starving on the streets of Haiti, and the food price is rising and the gas price is rising. In Haiti, it's devastating. And in Haiti, there are resistance groups that have emerged, right? You have this guy, Jimmy Barbecue, who's kind of, he's a former police officer who led a special division of the police that was very vicious, and he kind of went rogue. And he joined, he's kind of made a truce with some criminal gangs, and you've got this alliance, that is led by this former cop, and they have a lot of power on the streets of Haiti. And it looks like the United States is moving in there to try and stabilize things. And they're threatened by this guy, Jimmy Barbecue, and how much power he has. And so the USA is moving in to keep Haiti poor, right? Haiti's, suffering from capitalist austerity, and the high gas prices and high food prices have devastated the place. And it's just been a disaster. The USA overthrew Aristide. Aristide was a progressive and was moving Haiti in a more anti-imperialist direction, and the USA overthrew him. There was a coup. Bush, carried out a coup and overthrew Aristide in 2004. There was a military intervention, and now U.S. troops are going back in again to try and stabilize it, to keep this free market austerity government in power while the people of Haiti are out in the streets rioting. And you do have, an organized resistance entity. It's a very confused one, a former corrupt police officer. And it's certainly confusing, but you do have that. So there we go. Next question, right? The AIDS coalition in the 80s. Well, that was, it was a protest movement. That was a big part of being a leftist in the 80s. I did a video about, Gen X radicalism, right? Because we hear a lot about 60s radicals, 70s radicals. We don't hear a lot about like 80s and 90s activism, right? But in the 80s, ACT UP was a big political movement. It was people demanding money for AIDS research. They did zaps where they would like embarrass politicians. And it was gay activism in the 80s, right? And it was about raising awareness about the AIDS crisis. In the 80s, it was commonly believed that AIDS was a government creation. The Soviet Union believed that. and Iraq believed that, and most of the socialist world believed that AIDS was a government conspiracy. That was widely believed. Leslie Feinberg, the leader of the Workers' World Party, she believed that, and she said it, and she wrote articles for the Workers' World newspaper saying that. And in the Soviet Union, that was considered to be a fact. It was considered to be a fact that the U.S. government had created AIDS. The idea was they were using AIDS as a Malthusian mechanism to destroy Africa, to attack African countries. They were using it against the LGBT community because they were associated with activism and such. I have no evidence to say that AIDS was a government conspiracy, but that was widely believed. It was widely believed. And the Soviet Union said that that was true. And Saddam Hussein's Iraq said it was true. And, in the 80s, that was considered among anti-imperialist states, AIDS being a government conspiracy was believed. And I will tell you that I am very proud of the fact that I worked with, briefly, I didn't work with her very much. I worked with Leslie Feinberg, who was the first transgender activist in the history of the United States, the first openly trans activist in U.S. history, Leslie Feinberg. And she was a member of the Workers' World Party. And, she was part of the ACT UP movement. She protested for, money for AIDS and all of that. But one thing that Leslie Feinberg did is that Leslie Feinberg, she defended Cuba's right to quarantine AIDS victims, which was huge, right? Because at the time, there was so much opposition to quarantining AIDS victims, and they saw that, the AIDS crisis, and they saw like AIDS was homophobic. But when Cuba, they didn't know what was going on with AIDS in the 80s. And there was a fear in Cuba that it might be a U.S. government conspiracy. So Cuba, in order to prevent the spread of AIDS, Cuba was quarantining AIDS victims in the 80s. Leslie Feinberg disrupted anti-Cuba events by LGBT groups. And she defended Cuba's right to quarantine AIDS victims. That's how much of a tanky she was, right? So, the original trans rights activist, Leslie Feinberg, was a huge supporter of North Korea, huge supporter of Iran, a huge supporter of the Palestinians. I mean, she was a tanky through and through. And, it's worth pointing out. And I did work with her briefly. And she, we did work together a little bit, but she wouldn't approve of what I do now. That whole stream I just did, I'm sure she would vehemently disagree with a huge amount of what I do now. And that's okay, and I'm not a Feinbergist by any means. And, and I'm not, but then again, a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have really, really changed, and that, the last years she got Lyme disease and stopped being politically active. But the last years of her life when she was politically active, that's when I knew her. 2007, 2008, 2009, maybe. And I remember, these universities would pay her lots of money to come and speak about gay rights and LGBT stuff. And she would show up and her speech would be all about why gay people should support Cuba, why gay people should support North Korea, why gay people should support Iran. And she was horrified by what she called the pink washing, right? The pink washing of the LGBT movement, of imperialism, and how the LGBT movement that she had dedicated herself to had been hijacked to serve imperialism. And she saw it and she was against it. She defended Iran. One of the first articles of hers I ever read was that at my college, there was this poster that was put up everywhere and had two guys hanging. And it said, oh, Iran, the reason Ahmadinejad says there's no gay people in Iran is because he killed them all. It was this propaganda that was put up at my college. Well, Leslie Feinberg, I read in the Workers' World newspaper, Leslie Feinberg wrote an article showing that those two guys hanging were not hanged for being gay. They were hanged for raping a 13-year-old boy at knife point. Big difference. That took courage. This is an LGBT activist sticking up for Iran and saying, no, they don't hang gay people in Iran. That's false. That's pretty heroic. So there you go. There you go. Next question. Is Elon Musk an industrialist who's at odds with Silicon Valley? I would say so. Yeah, he's a figure that is fighting against the prevailing institutions of his own class. Right? He's not fully in the Trump camp, but he's more independent and he's more with the lower levels of capital than than most of Silicon Valley, right? He's more of a maverick. He's not fully in the Trump camp, but he's certainly more independent. He's more open to negotiating with Russia. He's more independent. Elon Musk is certainly a lot more independent, and he's not part of the club, the Silicon Valley technocratic club. He's not part of that club. He's independent, but he's also connected, right? And that's what you have to remember, is that there's people that have one foot in one place and one foot in another, and it's more complicated, right? And that things are very complicated, but he's a little more independent. But there's also a realization on the part of the establishment that they need to kind of loosen things up because people are getting tired of this, and they need to create kind of a safe outlet for people's anger, right? So we shall see. MAGA communism, I already answered it. And I said that the idea of engaging with Trump supporters about communism, the idea of realizing that the main danger is coming from the so-called fake left right now, that's fine. Now, does that mean that I'm like a supporter of Donald Trump? No, he murdered Qasem Soleimani. He said awful things about immigrants. He was an awful president. His presidency, it was better than Biden. He was certainly better than Biden. Anything would be better than this. We're living under a nightmare now, but no, I didn't vote for Trump. And so it's complicated, but even though I'm Donald Trump's favorite reporter, I'm not a MAGA guy. But in terms of, the broad masses of people, who are opposed to the wokeness and opposed to the left, the kind of people that are identifying with Carrie Lake and with MAGA resistance, that being the kind of people we need to win to communism. Yeah. What could be wrong with that? It's just, what could be wrong with that? Sounds good to me. It's like, if there's people in the MAGA movement that are in the Trump movement that want to learn about communism, want to start engaging with communist ideas, want to start seeing that the problem is capital. What could be wrong with that? Everyone on Twitter, they love to play this game where it's like, oh my God, everyone wants to get points by dunking on somebody. They want to make the worst possible interpretation of everything, so that they can get points by condemning it. Right. And it's like, oh, MAGA communism, that's retarded. Trump hates communism. Oh, it's like, that's, no one said Trump was a communist. Did they? Trump is definitely not a communist, but Trump is aligning himself with the forces that are at odds with the FBI. They're increasingly at odds with the Pentagon, and so people that are in opposition to the status quo in the United States are increasingly identifying with MAGA. So because of that, it would make sense to engage with MAGA people about communism and to make an effort to engage with people in the Trump sphere about communism. And the left is dead. You are not allowed to dissent on the left. You're not. In left circles, if you're critical of the wars, you're a Nazbol, you're an evil Nazi. In left circles, if you don't love the FBI, then you must be spreading conspiracy theories and you need to be banned from social media. The so-called left they are the foot soldiers of the establishment right now. This could change, but right now, yeah, it looks like we need to figure out how to get Marxist or communist politics to people in the MAGA camp. So if that's what MAGA communism means, I'm for it. But if it means something different, maybe I'm not for it. But as far as I understand it, the idea that we need to bring revolutionary anti-imperialism to people in the MAGA camp, that sounds good to me. All right. Social ecology developed by Murray Bookchin. Well, Murray Bookchin was hugely in opposition. I have read some of what he wrote against anarcho-primitivism. Murray Bookchin was an anarchist intellectual in New York City who did understand Marxist economics, and he held on to the economic components of Marxism for his anarcho-syndicalist beliefs. I've watched videos of some of his lectures. Overwhelmingly, he's just kind of a leftist, and I don't know his concept of social ecology, so I can't defend it. I'm generally critical. Anything environmentalist, I get nervous about. I'm suspicious, I am not ready to start saying things about climate change because I just don't know enough about it. But I'm at this point, any environmental, any ecology stuff, I get suspicious of. Because what they're doing now with this green degrowth, climate change, Extinction Rebellion and all that crap, and Greta Thunberg. This is degrowth fascism. This is anti-human. So I am highly suspicious of anything environmental. I'm not willing to say there's no global warming, but I'm highly suspicious of anything environmental at this point. Highly suspicious of it because I feel like it's coming from a bad place. Lula's politics in Brazil. Look, I was hopeful that because Lula went to prison, and because when he came out of prison, he was more sympathetic to North Korea and stuff, and because the Workers' Party seemed a little more radical in the last election and stuff, I was hoping that Lula, was becoming some kind of revolutionary, but that's not the case. Lula, look, it's pretty clear, and I've said this before, that the right wing in Latin America, the traditional right wing in Latin America, the Contras of Nicaragua, the paramilitaries in Colombia, those people are not going to be in power, right? And we saw like a turning point in Venezuela when Enrique Capriles, the leader of the opposition in Venezuela, suddenly stopped saying communism is evil, oh my God, and started saying things like, well, I'm a socialist too, I just don't hate America, I'm not a dictator, right? That since the Obama administration, the United States has been trying to reinvent its political alignments in South America. It has been trying to stop being aligned with the far right wing. Bolsonaro was aligned with the paramilitaries and the hard right wing and the military dictatorship in Brazil historically and stuff like that. Whereas, Lula was like a middle of the road social democrat. Wasn't like Maduro, wasn't, moving Brazil towards socialism, but he created like a welfare state. He did try to develop Brazil's economy kind of independently. And, then Dilma Rousseff came after him and the economy got bad and the oil price dropped. And so then Dilma Rousseff was ousted. I was in Brazil while that was going on, right? I gave a talk in Brazil about the oil prices and all of that. After that, Dilma Rousseff was ousted, and Michel Temer came in, and then Bolsonaro, the right-wing guy, got in, and he was identified with that old right wing, with the paramilitaries, with those folks, right? Now, things didn't get better under him. COVID and everything, things got worse. So now Lula's back in, and the way they kept Lula from being president and defeating Bolsonaro is they railroaded him to jail. He was framed. You read it, the judge and the prosecutor were in cahoots. They were texting each other. They railroaded Lula to jail. Lula went to jail on corruption charges unfairly. He was in jail. Then they exposed that it was corrupt. They let him out of jail. But, if you look at it, it's just like this guy in Colombia, right? Petro in Colombia, This isn't these, there's Maduro, that's real socialism. There's Nicaragua, Ortega, that's real socialism. Cuba, it's a communist party in power, but there's this new pink wave in Latin America. And it's like they've made a deal with these people, right? It's even the leaders of Honduras. Kamala Harris attended the inauguration in Honduras recently. These aren't real leftists. They're not as hostile to Venezuela or Nicaragua as their predecessors were. These aren't real leftists. These are the new social democratic face of imperialism. I'm not optimistic about Lula's presidency. But he could prove me wrong, and you never know how things might develop. And Lula, it looked like right after he got out of prison, that he was moving in a good direction, but that's no, that hasn't happened. No, Lula, his running mate was from the center right part. It was like he came back to power with Biden's blessing, with U.S. blessing. There was a deal that was made. Lula, you can do blank and you can't do blank. This is not, I was hoping that he would come out of jail revolutionary because they locked him up or something, but that's not how these things work, unfortunately. So, but Brazil is still an independent country. And Brazil has a very strong independent economy of its own. And, Brazil is, there's a lot of Chinese businesses. China has built huge power plants all over Brazil, hydroelectric power plants. China's role in Brazil is, China's role in Brazil is good. And Russia is invested in Brazil as well. So it's more complicated. There's a strong Communist Party in Brazil. The Communist Party in Brazil has a lot of influence, and it's a real Communist Party. It's not, so it's complicated. So, I don't know, Mr. Corbett. I'll have to check him out. Thanks for the super chat. So there you go. That's my analysis of all of that, folks. I'm tired. I'm bogged down on all the drama. Please, I just want to stream, and I'm just so tired of he said, she said, and cancel culture and high school shit. I just, tonight we had a very real chat where we talked about the problems of capitalism. And I got plenty more things that we can talk about. So, tomorrow's election day. We'll obviously talk about that tomorrow. And I'm going to keep trying to keep streaming as much as I possibly can because I got a whole room for it. And I've missed you guys so much over the last couple months. So there you go, folks. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. The people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.